Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first webinar for 2019. We're excited to have you with us, and hopefully you found the Zoom experience easy to log in. So we can see a few more people dropping in, but let's go ahead and get started and get the session underway. There is a Q&A function available in the app. So if you do have any questions, please go ahead and drop those questions into the Q&A as we move through the session. We've got the team at the office assisting there as well. But today's webinar is all about smart campaign canvas design, and we figured this was really the best way to kick off 2019, sort of after the holiday break, and give everybody a chance to revisit the canvas and look at what we can perhaps do differently in 2019. So my name is Derek Bell, and I'll be hosting the session for you today. We have Jason at the office as well, who's assisting with questions and answers if I lose track of those as they come through. So let's have a closer look at what our agenda is today, and we'll get started. What we promise you is some time-saving tips for the campaign canvas, and I'm really hoping you've got questions as well that we can focus on. So please make sure you use the Q&A function to drop those questions in. We'll then look at 3 specific examples of some campaign canvas design to help you maximize that experience and hopefully also save time. And then closely linked to the campaign canvas and what we're trying to achieve is about digital body language. I'm just going to show you a few easy examples and provide some insight as to how the campaign canvas can help you deliver a better customer experience by actually observing what people are doing and then actually acting on what they're doing. So we'll get started. Focus on some time-saving tips, and as I said, we'll promise you some shortcuts, tips and tricks. So some of you may be familiar with Stephen Covey, and Stephen Covey talks about the notion of beginning with the end in mind, or begin with the end in mind. And so his premise is that with a little bit of planning and with a little bit of insight into what we're trying to achieve, and if we can understand what the end state looks like, it puts us in a better position to figure out the journey. And that's really what we're doing, is working on journeys. So let's have a close look at some of these ideas around the campaign canvas. So certainly, one of the points that we drive home a great deal here at Marketing Cube is the emphasis that we place on the use of templates. And the campaign canvas enables you to certainly save certain canvases as templates. The key step there is that where possible, don't save a template with assets attached. So largely, a template should be all gray. So all of those elements sitting on the canvas should really be gray, unless there's absolutely fixed pieces. Sometimes there might be a fixed segment or a seed list, things like that. Or if it's an event, you might have, or a more of a nurturing process, probably you might include some wait steps with predetermined times. They can always be edited, of course, but the danger of adding assets to a template on the campaign canvas is that you have the potential of forgetting and obviously sending out incorrect emails. So whenever you do create a template for the campaign canvas, always work to ensure that there's no assets attached to that. One of the time-saving tips, especially for those of you who have integration with a CRM platform, is as soon as you access the template, and at this point it's still unsaved, is go through the process of completing your campaign settings, start and end date, and also potentially provide a description. If you do all of that and ensure the little box is ticked that says sync to a CRM, then once you save that, all of that information is then taken across to the CRM. So you don't have to bother with redoing things or then manually updating information within the CRM. So always try and take care of your campaign settings, the start and end dates, etc., before you save for the first time, and that information is then sent through to the CRM, which makes the CRM user experience a little bit easier and more consistent. Emphasis again, they're always on the end date. Don't run with the default. Eloqua's default is 12 months. But if you've got a campaign that's only running for a couple of days, that makes absolutely no sense to have the end date set for 12 months out. Usually the biggest red flag there for people is they think that if they end their campaign, say it launches on Monday, and then potentially they terminate it or have the last email go out on Friday, that if they end the campaign on the Friday, that they lose any reporting. But remember, Eloqua will always capture all of your campaign statistics for 12 months after the end date. So there is no need for end dates to be artificially extended for reporting purposes. Eloqua already takes care of that for you. So the other nice thing is then when you're looking at the My Eloqua screen and you look at the number of active campaigns, all of a sudden that number becomes far more real because end dates have been correctly entered within the platform. Now, the other nice thing you can do on the canvas to save time, and this is often helpful potentially if you have multiple streams running, so you might have 3 or 4 different segments running across the top of your canvas, then dropping into individual emails, etc. Once you work out the experience that you want to deliver for one of those, while all of the assets are still not attached, and you've got all your elements laid out, you can then easily just highlight the entire group of elements and then use your keyboard to copy and paste, which just saves you time, certainly saves time from a build point of view. It also helps deliver a bit more consistency as well, so that's also a positive. From a brainstorming point of view, and this is not quite Eloqua build time saving, well, it could be a little, I suppose, is when I meet with clients, I generally, if we're working to design a campaign, I'll generally encourage them to jump into a conference room of some sort with a big screen, whether it's projecting or TV, whichever it is, and put the campaign canvas up on the screen. And as you're working through the campaign and trying to determine the experience that you want to deliver, you'll find it a lot easier to actually start nutting that out on the canvas. That means that when the meeting is finished and you go back to your office, you're then not having to replicate the whole process from your written notes. So keeping in mind that you can also add notes to the individual elements as well. So as you add emails to the flow and the experience that you're trying to deliver, you can do a right click on any of those elements on the campaign canvas and get a closer look at that. So that's always a more helpful way to do things. Now, something I just wanted to get a bit of an idea of was what you see some of your business priorities are for 2019. So I'm just going to throw this poll up on the screen here for you and ask you if you could just select the one that you feel is more important. Okay, let's end that poll and have a closer look. Okay, so you can see the clear winner there is the need to generate and qualified leads. So we might take a cue from that, and maybe next month we can jump into that as a topic to look at how Eloqua can help you do that. Thanks, guys. We appreciate you taking the time to answer that for us. So some other tips for the campaign canvas to help save some time can certainly come about when it relates to the ability to consolidate reporting. So some of you over the times in different training sessions that I've been running and in conversation, people have said, so how do I get those dotted lines onto the canvas? What does it mean? So first thing you'll notice is when you look at the actual screen on your campaign canvas, when you have landing pages and forms, it always says just next to it landing page, and then it has in brackets for reporting only. And that's exactly what it is. The beauty of the dotted lines is that it tells you that in that particular email, and you can see here the number 3 email, there's a dotted line coming from that email up to the landing page, and then from the landing page to the form. So what that tells me, it's a visual cue on screen that that email contains a hyperlink to that landing page, and that landing page has that form sitting on it. So again, you can see the importance of a naming convention. This is actually a screenshot from today's campaign canvas for the user group. So that dotted line is just a visual confirmation that you've got the right URL sitting in that particular email, which is always a positive. And then the fact that you've got the landing page and the form sitting on the canvas means that when you look at reporting, that you'll have additional information included. So notice here, I've shortened this down. Obviously, I've been slicing and dicing for the purposes of that image. But highlighted at the bottom there of that campaign analysis report is the average landing page time, visitors, and also form submissions. And so what you get there is consolidated reporting. If you don't have that landing page and form icon sitting on the campaign canvas, you would then have to pull 3 separate reports to get the same information. So certainly a time-saving tip from that point of view. Now, it's not just landing pages and forms that are sitting in particular emails that you may want to put on the canvas. If there are common landing pages and forms that you may have a link to in all of your emails, it could be something as simple as the contact us page, that you may have special offers, etc., that go out in all emails for a period of time. You can just manually drop those onto the canvas as well. Double click on it, find the relevant landing page and add that. Now, there won't be any dotted lines typically for those, but the fact that they're sitting on the canvas means that you will also get some reporting there at the campaign analysis by campaign of any activity by those campaign members across all of those different assets. So again, if you're just looking to try and consolidate that reporting, just go ahead and add those steps to the canvas. And when you drop an email on the canvas and you save the canvas, a small icon appears directly to the right of in the bottom right-hand corner of the email. You've probably seen that icon at different points. If you just double click on that icon, it'll open up and ask you to add the relevant icons to the landing page. And that's exactly what's happening there. So that's how you consolidate that reporting. Let's have a look at some additional ideas for the campaign canvas. The secret, I suppose, with anything that you're doing in relation to talking to people from an electronic point of view is that I find that the magic seems to come about through consistency. And that can be through consistency of the way a web pages or website is designed. It can be consistency in the manner in which you engage people, ask them to do things, registering for events. If the way that you ask them to do that is the same every single time, it creates far more consistency for that person and is a lot easier. So let's have a closer look. What I've done here is I've just literally gone through my inbox and selected 3 random emails, slightly different in objective. So the first 2 are more news oriented, one from a news source talking about different things. But when I see that email come through, it's always exactly the same format. And so I can look at that and I can scan through really quickly and get straight to what it is that I'm actually interested in looking at. The second comes from American Express, so it's a little bit more tailored, but again, the consistency of that particular email is it's always the same. And then the last one is a little bit more of a administration type email, really. It's from Oracle, just talking about particular functions of the platform. They always break it down. You can see, or perhaps you might not be able to see very easily, but essentially it's got a heading, it's sort of an introduction telling you what's going on, then it explains what's changing, what are the next steps, and then also the timeline. So all of those key pieces of information that I need are right there. So when I get those emails, I can open them and there's consistency in that process. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to follow and I can just do it really quickly. So that notion of creating an experience and a consistent experience is no different to the campaign canvas. The campaign canvas, obviously, is something that you look at. It's not something that the customer sees, but they certainly experience that process. So this is a very simple canvas that you can see on the screen right now. And so here we're looking at a segment which goes out to an email being sent and then simply to a wait step. The reason I raised this one is I met with a customer a little while ago who was using pretty much this function on the campaign canvas, and that was it. That was kind of the end of the campaign. Then what they were doing was creating a segment to work out who had opened that email, and for those that hadn't opened it, they were then sending a second email. But that was actually taking place on 2 canvases and with the need to create an additional segment. So there's a time-saving step right here. And this is probably one of the more basic campaign canvas templates that we use at Marketing Cube, and we use it fairly regularly. It's now automating the process. So instead of having to move from that wait step and then going off and creating a segment and working out, first of all, who did I send that first email to, and then who did or did not open that email, etc., I can automate that entire process on one canvas. At the heart of what Eloqua is, it's obviously a marketing automation system with emphasis on automation. So don't forget that you can reduce the number of canvases with just a little bit of planning. The other tip to remember in this scenario is that remember, Eloqua will never send the same email to the same person twice. So in that particular example, we need to make sure that if we are sending that second email, that it's a save as of the first email. And in that particular example, you probably want to look at changing the subject line and maybe alternating the time of day for delivery. That would probably be the other easy thing to do there to try and increase lift rates or open rates, sorry. So we had a customer who deals largely with HR professionals, and in this particular example, this is how they chose to do all of their emails. They added a few bits and pieces and different steps for different campaigns, but at its heart, that's exactly what they delivered. And on average, that second email delivered, I think it was a 32% lift in open rates. So it certainly delivers results to take advantage of the automation. There are other things that you can do to tap into some of that digital body language. And in the course of a campaign running, it's likely that things can change. So it could be that a person's job category is updated, or maybe their profile is enhanced to now include postcode or their geographical location, for instance. So you can check these things along the way if by asking the question, you then potentially deliver a slightly different experience. So the compare contact fields step or element on the campaign canvas is a really handy way for you to check additional information. Now, there's also a step available where you compare fields on a custom data object as well. So if you do have another system or another database attached, you could also compare custom object fields. The other one, of course, is using shared filters. Shared filters is another great way to be very specific in relation to the question that you're asking, especially if people have clicked. So when you drag the standard element onto the canvas from Eloqua asking, did they click on the email? What you're actually asking is, did they click on anything? Was there anything at all that they clicked on? So if that's all you need, and quite often from a nurturing campaign, that's all you really need. You're just trying to sort of measure engagement. However, if you want to be very specific because the next part of your journey will alter based on what they've clicked on, then you could use a shared filter to ask a very specific question of a very specific URL. So just some tips there to make your life a little easier. Another one that's a big time saver, and these can be added to any particular campaign, is the move and add to campaign functions. In the course of a single campaign, well, actually, let me give you one example. So we have a client who has an offshore team that do a lot of the heavy lifting, so the building of the canvases and the assets, etc. And when it came to events, it was proving a little bit of a challenge for them because the team here in Australia weren't as quick as getting them all of the content they needed in order for the event to function. And so what they found themselves doing was dropping a segment on the canvas, sending out invitation emails, waiting, then potentially having a second invitation, checking to see if people had registered, etc. But all of the copy was not always ready. And so they found they would have to then end that particular canvas, then move on to a new canvas, create a new segment, etc., drop it on, and then progress people through as the copy and content was delivered by the team in Australia. One of the big time-saving tips for them, well, the big time-saving tip would have been if they could get the brief at once, but unfortunately, that just wasn't going to happen. So in order to make their lives a little bit easier, we suggested that they use the move to campaign function. So what that enables them to do is, whereas if you're running an event, you might have just one campaign canvas, they're in a situation where they might have 2 or 3 campaign canvases for one single event. So in order to save them having to create new segments, etc., and manually move people across, you can get Eloqua to do that for you. So simply by using the move to campaign function, what that does, it takes the person out of the particular campaign canvas they're on at the moment, and it moves them to the new campaign canvas. The add to campaign step at the top will leave somebody in an existing campaign, but will now add them to the second campaign. So slight difference there in behavior. You'll notice that the add to campaign step is actually a through step, meaning that people come in at the top and then work their way out and will progress and continue in that particular campaign. But that step will add them to a second campaign. Whereas you'll notice the move to campaign function doesn't have a through step. When you come into this particular element on the canvas, it's game over. So you come into the move to campaign step or element, and then you will be moved from this campaign onto another campaign. So slight difference there in the way that you use those. Just keeping in mind, there's the Q&A function there. So please, if you need to ask a question, go ahead and use the Q&A function to do that. Okay, so some examples of campaigns, and we'll show you a fairly horrendous one here in just a moment, is onboarding and welcome campaigns. And these are somewhat sort of high on the list of many organizations. We often find from a sales point of view, actually, when people are initially buying Eloqua, this is one of the goals that they have, is they want to get some sort of an onboarding campaign or a welcome campaign in place. So there are all sorts of ways that you can do that, and every organization will be unique in the way that they execute it, more so down to the content, but potentially the method and the way that you go about doing it is reasonably similar. What we wanted to do was show you an example of one particular onboarding campaign. Now, I couldn't fit the entire thing on the screen, but we can show you the basics and what's going on here. So most of you will be able to see exactly and sort of read this and understand exactly what's going on. On the left-hand side, this particular onboarding campaign is for Eloqua users. So if you join our user group, which some of you obviously have done, if you do it by our website, you'll come through under the segment on the left-hand side. We just do a little bit of data scrubbing at that point. We did have another campaign that we ran that fed people in here as well, but the primary point of entry is this one here on the left-hand side. And then the first thing that we do, we just need to identify if you're a customer of Marketing Cubes or not. And so if you are a customer, you head off in one direction, and if you're not a customer of Marketing Cubes, you'll head off in the other direction. And then essentially you can see some of the wait steps there. We're waiting for 2 weeks, etc., then checking to see if you've opened emails. What we also do is we use a shared list. So every single user group that we run, the form has a standard add to shared list in it. It's just one big growing shared list. And every single time you register, you get dropped into that particular shared list. And the purpose of that is so that when you move through this particular campaign, we can just double check to see if you've actually registered for a user group, because that form on the website is simply joining the user group as a team member, not actually registering for a specific user group. So what we want to do then is alter our communication to you based on whether or not you've actually registered for a user group. And of course, the incentive there is to drive you to keep an eye out for different emails and then to join the user group. And so that process basically repeats. I think there's about 5 emails in that process, and it lasts for about 3.5 or 4 months all up. And each of those emails just provide guidance and tips and links to various resources to help you get more out of Eloqua. So that's an example of an onboarding campaign. The easiest way to do that is to possibly think about your messaging and the key points that you want to get across to people from an onboarding or a welcome campaign. And then look at how you would break that down. So if you've got a whole range of things you want to talk to people about, do you inundate them with 10 things in the first email, or do you simply break it down and maybe just focus on one at a time? Is 2 weeks a good amount of time in between? 2 weeks, I think, is good. You don't want to flood people necessarily. You obviously secured them as a customer or a member of a particular subscription, etc. So it's just a gentle process as you educate them. I've got a question here from Hannah, and Hannah says, are we able to talk a little bit more about shared filters? Absolutely. So shared filters, Hannah, are basically an extension of segmentation. So when you go into Eloqua and build a segment, you'll be familiar with the idea of adding a filter criteria on the left-hand side. And then over on the right-hand side, the interface gives you all of the different things that you can filter on. So have people opened emails? Have they not opened emails, etc.? All of that sort of stuff, website visits, etc., all those different things. So when you build a shared filter, the interface is exactly the same. The beauty of that then is that when you launch your campaign, you've obviously done all your filtering and that's sitting there in the segment, but it may be that in the course of your campaign, and typically something like a nurture campaign is a good example because they typically run for longer. So at the point of somebody entering a nurturing campaign, it might take 2 or 3 or 4 months for them to go through that process. And in that process, you may ask people questions that would in fact increase their profile. So you may now, sort of 2 or 3 months in, you may now be aware that they are of a senior level. Maybe they're a chief marketing officer or a chief financial officer. You may gather information in relation to their industry. So all of these different data points that you're capturing along the way could potentially be used to alter the experience that they have in your particular nurturing campaign. And that's where your shared filter comes in. So the shared filter will enable you to ask additional questions of Eloqua prior to you potentially sending them emails. Certainly, if industry is probably a great example. So if you start to, or now you know that the person is in a particular industry, you could now have a far more targeted conversation with that person and share content and links, etc., with that person that relates far more to their industry. But shared filters, essentially, what I like to say, shared filters enable you to essentially segment on the fly. So it enables you to continue asking questions of people as you move through. Okay. Paul, that's an omission on my behalf. So thank you very much for making that point. We might correct that for the next process. Thank you very much. Okay, let's scoot through. We're just going to leave those campaign canvases and those different options behind us now. Does anybody have any questions at all in relation to those? Okay, we'll end that poll and get a little bit of a feel for some of the CMS systems that people are using. Okay, thank you for going through that process. Okay. All right, so look, sorry to do this to you again. We're going to jump into digital body language right now, but I did want to try and get some sort of a feel in relation to your use, or your use of digital body language in your campaigns today. So this is a single response. So if you could have a scan down those and read through those, this will just shape the next few slides a little bit further. Okay, people are starting to respond. Yeah, very interesting. So I'm just rereading these myself. Again, all of these questions that we're asking, and thank you so much for your participation. These will all help shape future user group sessions over the coming months. So the more statistically relevant we can make it, the better. Okay, so still a couple more people to answer that one. Give you another 30 seconds. All right, let's have a look at those results. Okay, the third one, that's good news. Of course, you know, the fourth one is maybe a little bit of nirvana, but that's okay. Let me share those with you. Okay, there we go. All right, let's jump in and have a look. Thank you again for taking a look at that for us. So the reading and observing of digital body language done well can really help to improve engagement with your constituents, your users, customers, prospects, etc. And it's sometimes, as I said, they're the subtle observations that we make can really make a change in relation to how you connect with people, essentially. So at its most basic, the digital body language really enables you to look at a person's online behavior and then engage with that person, as I've said there, as it seems appropriate. And you can then control that experience and tailor that experience that you're delivering to people. Now, this is not complex stuff. It's really quite simple. The heavy lifting really comes down to content. And sometimes that content is not necessarily a complete rewrite. It can be very subtle changes that you make to simply have that particular piece of content resonate better with the person who's receiving it. And it could be something as simple as imagery. It could be something as slightly different subject lines in emails that are personalized based on a person's job category or job title, or even their region or their geographical location, whichever it is. There can be some really subtle things that you can do to alter that. Let me give you an example. So these three banners that you can see, and it might depend how I think everyone will know certainly where the center image is. That's obviously Singapore. On the left-hand side is beautiful Auckland Harbour. And then over on the far right-hand side is Adelaide. That's Festival Hall, a small white building you can see there just by the river. So this is an example of some imagery that we have previously used in some of our newsletters. And so a very simple way to have some content and have a point of recognition. And at this point, it's a very visual piece of recognition that goes out to people. And there are all sorts of different things you can do. So if, for instance, you're a telecommunications provider and you have stored against a profile a person's phone, or maybe at least the brand, you know, is it a Samsung, is it an Apple, is it a, I don't know what else there is these days, but whatever other handsets there are, you know, could some imagery, some very subtle imagery be applied to support it? So if, you know, if I get an email from my telecommunications provider, you know, it would have a picture of an iPhone, for instance, versus trying to push Samsung accessories onto me, because I assure you I'll never buy them. But very simple things like that, that you've got data available to you. Now, whenever you use things like dynamic content to deliver to people based on their profile, then you can always, or you must always add a default as well. So you can always have a nice soft generic image as well if the data is not there to drive those rules. So when you're looking at Eloqua from a dynamic content point of view, this is the interface. Most of you will probably be fairly familiar with this interface. And so over on the left-hand side, you can see a variety of rules that we've created. You can name those whatever you want to call them. It made sense for us to name them as the various cities and locations. And then what we're doing is we're accessing contact fields within Eloqua. Now, keeping in mind that you can also access using the plus icon over here on the right-hand side, you can also access custom data object information as well. So you do have some options there. But it could be as simple as looking at things like postcode. It could be, do you have country information? Perhaps your database is configured in such a way that you also have regional information. So we have in our system, for instance, once we know a person's country, we then roll that up automatically using a region field, which tells us if they're in Asia or Asia Pac or Europe or EU or North America, essentially. So there are all sorts of points of data that you can access to deliver very personalized content. Now, why would you do this? Well, you would do this obviously to get people's attention, to try and make the content more engaging, but you can also use their digital body language to tailor them and send them in certain directions. So let's have a closer look. So the digital body language, typically your observation and interpreting of that digital body language really starts in segments. So at a segment level, you've got the ability to run through profile information. So you've got profile data, which might be more so around geography, job title, industry, all that profile information. A campaign that we were looking at, which we called bottom of the barrel. And bottom of the barrel was looking at those contacts that we're not engaging with. And if you all did this exact same process, you would find that you would have a decent size of contacts in your database that you've potentially not sent any emails to. Now, to get a more realistic number, what you also want to do though is make sure you exclude anybody that's a hard bounce back or even an unsubscribe. So you certainly want to make sure you take care of that. Otherwise, you might get a fairly unrealistic number as to those people. So you can see they're excluded and excluded, and the one value here in the middle, which is looking not actually at the person's digital body language, this is us actually not engaging with them for whatever reason, is the not sent any email step. So that can become a way for you to target that particular group and look at some degree of reactivation potentially for that group of people as well. But you can see over here on the right-hand side, you can start to understand what people are doing. So are they opening emails, opening specific emails? Are they opening emails from campaigns? And just as you've got the positive, there's always the negative. So you'll also see not sent in the emails, not sent specific emails, et cetera, et cetera. So you can use all of that from an inclusion and exclusion point of view. And then all of this information that we've looked at here, back to Hannah's point earlier, is this same interface, or the shared filter interface is essentially the same as this. So a shared filter enables you to dig into that same level of detail and really start to interrogate a person's digital body language to help you personalize that experience even further. So it begins in segments, that's where it starts, but it continues on the canvas in multiple ways. Now, we already shared with you earlier about being able to access the contact area. So let me just scoot back. So that was looking at this one. So this was using the compare contact fields option. So that's one way that you're able to access more so profile information really than digital body language information. But coming back to the canvas, we can now start to introduce shared filters. So see, Hannah, you sort of beat me to the post there. We've had shared filters on the agenda. Please, again, if you do have any other questions, Hannah, in relation to that, just let me know. That shared filter, essentially, as I've said there, is really segmentation on the fly. And that's how you're able to ensure that the message you're delivering and the email that you're sending is as relevant as possible to that particular person. So the elements provide you for a way to observe the digital body language and then adjust the experience to better suit those observed behaviors. And so that becomes a balance between accessing that information on the campaign canvas, but then also looking at altering your content so that your content is more relevant based on the digital body language that you've actually observed. So you can work through that process and begin to think through a far more magical experience that you're delivering versus simply doing the same old, same old. I mean, one example of a simple way to potentially look at accessing digital body language to alter an experience is to maybe start with your newsletters. So if there are newsletters that you're sending out and you're sending them out on a regular basis, let's argue they might go once a month or even if they go once a quarter, potentially. So one way to access digital body language would be to look at those people who have been sent, for instance, the last 3 emails, the last 3 newsletters, and that might have taken place over the last 3 or 9 months. Then filter that down using segments to understand who did not open any of those newsletters potentially, or maybe the last one, just keep playing with the filters, right? If somebody hasn't opened the last 3 newsletters, what's the merit really of sending them a 4th newsletter? Maybe you need to do something slightly different with that subset of people to try and get them more re-engaged in the content. And it could be as simple as asking the question, what is it you want to hear about? So if there's a preference center involved in the process, then the preference center can be a great vehicle to drive that person to, in place of pushing them onto another newsletter. So maybe try something a little bit different. What's the old saying? Keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Well, it's the definition of insanity. I think I've messed that quote up there somehow, but hopefully you get my point. The newsletters are a good start. There's a little bit of FOMO, has a fear of missing out. Some people won't unsubscribe because they feel that maybe something will pop up that they really should see, but that's not really doing you any favors because they're not actually reading and engaging with your content. At the end of the day, our job is not to send emails. Our job is to encourage people to actually engage with the content and hopefully get some value out of that content that we're delivering. Our next step is to look at the next Oracle release and to see what's coming. As you know, last year there were changes made to the release names for Eloqua. And so this year they'll all be release 19, which is the year 2019. And then there's one each quarter, so it'll be A, B, C, and D for each quarter. So 19A is due, we believe, in February. However, as of this morning, there's nothing yet on the Oracle Topliner site, Eloqua Insiders, to give me an idea of what's coming. So what I'll do is share with you some rumors. Rumors are always fun anyway, right? Some of the rumors that we've heard of things that are coming that we're pretty confident will arrive is certainly some changes to the dynamic and shared content editors. So you'll notice now, if you've been using the new email and landing page editors for a little while, that whole experience of building out those assets is completely different with the drag and drop function, etc. However, if you then go back into dynamic content or shared content, you then revert back to the old drag and drop or having to click through and then work in HTML. We understand that Oracle are working on updating those two editors so that they will mirror the experience that you're having with email and landing page editors. So that's a real positive. I'm finding that I'm already using a lot more dynamic content and even shared content with the new editors because they're so much easier to work with. They're HTML free. It's all kind of fun. So it'll be good to have that ease of build, etc., sent off to those dynamic and shared content editors. The next one is there will be an update coming to the form editor, and we're pretty confident that that one will take place in February, so next month. Essentially, it's kind of an interface update. The forms themselves are not fundamentally changing in any way. So you'll find that transition very simple. The processing steps is not changing at all, but it's really that front end of the form, and the way that you build the form will look a lot more like the email and landing page editors as well. So you can see that Oracle are working through those editors to get them all upgraded and updated to give you a more consistent experience as you go through. Now, the other one still seems to be a little bit of a rumor, and we're trying to seek some additional information in relation to this one, which is around social publishing. So many of you we know are already using the ability to tap into Facebook and LinkedIn through paid form ads in those social sites, and that helps you bring information in to Eloqua through the campaign canvas. That's great. However, the social publishing component is designed for you to be able to create content within Eloqua and then actually push that out as posts to various social sites. This was rumored for November last year, but I think the landing page editor got brought forward because that originally was going to be February, but that became November last year, etc. So there are obviously some internal priorities coming to bear there. So as soon as we learn more about the social publishing piece, we will provide you with an update. So in the absence of any specifics from Oracle, I thought it'd just be prudent to quickly recap on some of those bits and pieces that you've currently got available, but I know some of you are still not using. So please reach out to us if you've got questions and we can go from there. And the big one, of course, is the landing page editor. So the landing page editor became generally available in November last year. The whole experience that you've had in relation to emails and landing pages for today's user group, that whole experience was built using the new email and also landing page editors. There's the closed loop reporting dashboard, which has been added to dashboards within Eloqua, and also for those customers using Salesforce and Eloqua, Salesforce CRM, there is a new integration app. So if you're interested in that, the big thing that's offering basically is faster communication between the platforms. If you're interested in understanding more about that, please contact Jason or Adrian here at Marketing Cube. We can have a chat with you about that, some pros and cons, just to understand it is what we call a controlled availability program. So I think the point made by Oracle was that if you have a little bit of a desire for living on the edge a little bit, I'm translating that word, that they were not their words, it's my words, living on the edge a little bit, then you might want to play with that. If you have a sandbox, that's probably a better solution. But if you're interested, please contact us. Authenticated microsites and secure inboxes. So if you're wanting to provide people, build Eloqua landing pages that people have to actually log into, then that's something that you can certainly explore further. The Content Experience Cloud is the old Oracle content marketing product, so Content Experience Cloud. So there's more integration available from that directly from within the new editors within Eloqua. Add This, I'm curious if anyone's actually had to play with this. The Add This content app basically enables you to add the Add This social buttons to your Eloqua landing pages, not email at this stage is my understanding, just simply to landing pages. Okay, so there's just a question here from Hannah. What about the do not stack option with responsive emails and responsive landing pages? That I understand is still on the drawing board, Hannah. I've not seen any specifics in relation to that, but I think throughout this year, we'll see a fairly aggressive ramp up of additional functionality and tightening up of certain aspects of the email and landing page editor based on some conversations I've had with the Oracle team, but not that specifically. So I might take that away and see if I can find any additional information for you on that one. Add This, if anybody's using Add This today on your website, you've already got an account, that's great. You can simply get your Eloqua administrator to add this app, there's no charge, to your Eloqua instance, and then add it to relevant landing pages as well. So something for you to think about. And Litmus, this enables you to access Litmus or get Litmus test results directly within the Eloqua interface via the email editor. So if you're using Litmus and you have a corporate account with Litmus, then you'll find that something helpful to potentially look at integrating. The actual integration between the two platforms, there's no cost. You just simply must have a Litmus, I believe they call it a corporate account. I have to check that specifically, but there is information in the Help Center with a few more links, etc., for you to understand, and also in the Oracle Cloud Marketplace, where you can get additional details there as well. But that brings us to a close for today's user group. I trust that information's been helpful for you. If you do have any questions, you're welcome, Hannah. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to stay online here for a few more minutes and work through those with you. But if not, we will see you next month. If you do have any burning questions or ideas for the user group, love for you to send those through. Please contact me via email. And we'd be lovely to work on some of those with you. So thank you very much and have a great week.